What's up? Welcome to another episode of Our Two Cents. I'm Chris Dobson. That's Gerry Green. It is Thursday, January 18th. Hard to believe January is already halfway over. 2024 is off with a bang. Gerry, we've got a great show. We've got a lot to talk about here tonight, and we're going to start with the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League.
There
Almost got that
you
wrong.
go.
There we go. We had the QMJHL as it would. The new commissioner, Mary Caccini, was taking his tour throughout the Maritimes over the last week. One of the things that was mentioned during some of his press is something we wanted to talk about here off the hop. And that, of course, kind of ties into some of the news that came out of Bathurst this week that they're looking for new ownership out there. But the thing I want to talk about is attendance in the QMJHL. And that is, if you look at the attendance this season, no surprise, of course, your big three carry the workload at the top. Your Quebec Ramparts, who are still averaging 91.45, which is actually pretty remarkable seeing how,
and their last place, Chris.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. So now that they're in their retool after their Memorial Cup win, but then behind them, you've got the Mooseheads at a little over 8,000, 80.52. And then up from them is the Moncton Wildcats, who are now averaging 43.53. So one of the things I thought was really interesting was during the media scrum he had talked about attendance actually being up year over year this year. So overall, as a whole, the attendance is up, I believe he said 6.7%, just shy of 7%. And the reason that this is notable, he said every team except for three of them actually have increased attendance numbers. And one of the three was like a 0.3% decrease. So he called that a wash. But the reason this is significant is because if you remember, he has been the commissioner now for about 60% of one season. And in his season, look at everything he's done, starting with this is the first year that fighting's been banned in the QMJHL. And everything you've heard was, oh, you're going to lose attendance. You're going to lose this. This is a big part of the game. This is why people go. You're going to lose fans. Then amongst all of that, then he had a full-blown rebrand in the middle of the season as well. So overall, looking at the numbers, and the reason I brought up the top numbers is because looking at the bottom numbers, okay? So Val-d'Or, Blainville, and Acadie Bathurst. So Val-d'Or, averaging 16.54, Blainville averaging 16.29, and Acadie Bathurst averaging shy of 1,500 fans a game at 14.96. So my thoughts are this, and that is after the press conference that took place, how tough is it going to be to find new ownership? Because, part of this whole thing was we want to find new ownership who's going to keep the team here in Bathurst. And that's, if you're looking at the end of the day, this is also a business, Gerry. And you have to look at the business dynamics. And outside of that 1 year when Bathurst won the Memorial Cup a few years back, their attendance has been awful. If the team's not good, nobody goes. What can they do to fix it?
It's always been, as long as I've covered the Q and focused on Bathurst, even with Morissette was there, and then they said they were going to get local ownership, and then that was going to change the whole dynamic.
Well, at one point they had 30 local owners, didn't they?
There. Yes, exactly. Including couturiers, both of the couturiers. But
yep.
Chris, don't think this sounds too crazy, but as you say, who is going to come in? You've had all the prominent local people get involved, and they now want to find a new owner. Up in Edmundston, New Brunswick, they have a very successful Junior A team, of which every night they get over 2,200 fans out to watch the Blizzard, formerly the DF Commandos. Now, I'm not saying, and I don't know who the ownership is in Edmundston, but I'm saying is it's probably more likely they're going to have to move. I don't think anybody can come into Bathurst, and God bless, and get the attendance up or make it feasible to keep a team there as an owner or an ownership group or whatever the case may be. There are other locales that could possibly take on the Titan and turn a community around that has been waiting for a team of that quality. But it's interesting how they do things in Edmundston. There is a ravenous desire for hockey, and they come out and they've always had a good Blizzard team there. and that's keep the fans coming. But they have a beautiful rink there as well. Only maybe, since the Commandos moved there, probably 7 or 8 years now, but beautiful facility. So it's a possibility that could happen. But I still don't find these numbers that you put out. I always remember the Ramparts were always in 5 digits. They were always in 10 to 11,000 as an average. The Mooseheads were always up around 9,000. And the Moncton Wildcats, more specifically, Chris, always in that 51, 5,200 fans on average. And here they come in at 43, 53. You can't tell me that that's an increase. Is it an increase from COVID? I don't know where those numbers are coming from, 6%, but I'm thinking they're down 10.
I think these numbers come, and I'm going to use Moncton specifically. I think these numbers come from the move to the Avenir Center, because if you look at it, because I agree with you, when the team was at the Coliseum and we were broadcasting those games every night, and when we were down there doing those games and you saw the attendance, yeah, the average was over 5,000 people, 551. The minute they moved downtown, yes, the product changed. Yes, there's corporates now. Yes, everything else is there. So they're getting, maybe less families, but more individual tickets being sold. But I would have to think year over year, since they've moved to the Avenir Center, that's where I think the increased percentage is coming from. Maybe I'm wrong. But being in the building, I could see it myself. It's odd to think about. But, if that's the case, and if this is trending in the right direction, good on the QMJHL at this point. We can sit here and criticize it all we want. All he cares about is numbers last year over this year. This is his first year. And if he's seeing an increase, then yeah, something's going right. So, if all teams but 3 are showing an increase, which means profits are there, or at least your P&Ls are balancing. I don't know what that means, but overall, from a business perspective, it looks like the league is very healthy. And since fighting was taken out of it and people said, no, you're going to lose fans, sounds to me like it didn't have the impact everyone thought it was going to have.
Not necessarily what I think fans would not come because they banned fighting, but I think it's silly to ban fighting. If you want to ask my opinion, that is my opinion. That's my 2 cents, Chris.
We could do a whole show on that.
It does happen. It's a passionate, emotional game, and sometimes it happens. And to say you're banning it, I think that's a strong word. You're trying to deter it by giving heavy penalties, okay? But that's another subject we can go on for a long time. Let's move on to the NHL, Chris.
Okay, we are. And we're going to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that is, of course, the question, what is wrong with the Leafs? Like, it feels like we're doing this a couple times a year now.
Yeah.
I'm going to list off some teams, Gerry, and I want you to just give me your honest thoughts on what you think any of this has in common. The Ottawa Senators, the Montreal Canadiens, the Minnesota Wild, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Anaheim Ducks, the San Jose Sharks, and the Chicago Blackhawks. What do those 7 teams have in common?
And we're talking about the Toronto Leafs. They've all beaten the Leafs.
They are the only 7 teams with less regulation wins than the Leafs this season. That's it.
Okay. I don't know. Maybe they've all beaten the Leafs too.
They very well could have. But if that's not alarming to anybody and of course, the Leafs just re-extended Nylander to the biggest contract ever. When we talked about it, saying, you could have moved one of these pieces for some defense or some grit or a goaltender or how it's going to look. I would have to say, and this is my opinion, that I think the next 3-game road trip the Leafs are on. I think they've got the Flames, they've got the Canucks, and somebody else out west.
And Seattle.
Seattle. There we go.
And Seattle.
If they lose 2
they could come home.
Yeah, if they lose 2 or 3 of these, Sheldon Keefe's out of a job.
Yes.
That's my opinion.
Well, you know what, Chris? With that particular road trip, here they are hovering just 2 points out of a wild card spot. They could drop into a wild card spot if Tampa Bay, let's say, wins tonight. And then you have Calgary, Vancouver, and Seattle. You could come off that road trip and find yourself, if they lose all 3, which isn't unheard of.
It's not impossible.
All 3 teams are good at home. They could find themselves chasing a wild card spot. That would be just fascinating. Just fascinating.
Look, I say
Chris,
this with
what I found fascinating. Yes, what I found fascinating this week is a fellow that was drafted in the queue, Marc-Andre Fleury, who surpassed Patrick Waugh this week in 552 wins as a goaltender, 4 seasons with the Quebec or the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles, and then he spent 12 seasons in Pittsburgh, where he won 3 cups. And the one I remember specifically, Chris, is in 2009 when he slid across and with seconds left and stopped Lidstrom's shot, sprawling across the crease and getting the win in Detroit. I'll never forget that. He's been one of those goaltenders that I don't think there was enough made of the 552 wins and him surpassing Patrick Waugh. And a matter of fact, he does it in 1,008 games. Waugh took 1,029 games to get 551. So I don't think there's enough respect. It all started for me when Pittsburgh wins the cup. Fleury held the fort, and then Matt Murray came in and saved the day, which I still, so they ship him out with his big contract, put him in the expansion draft. Vegas picks him up. What does he do? He goes to another cup, but then loses to Washington in 2018. I just don't think, and he's been traded around a little bit and performing very well in Minnesota. It just doesn't feel like there was enough made of the fact that he's the second behind Martin Brodeur. I don't think he can catch Martin Brodeur, Chris. Brodeur played till he was 43. Now, Fleury's 39, so that's 4 years, but he's 140 wins behind. I think Martin Brodeur has a firm hold of that most wins by a goalie in the NHL. But full marks, he's got Vezina wins. Fleury's got Stanley Cup wins, 3 of them, and still performing at a top level at his 39 years old. And matter of fact, Waugh retired when he was 38, and as I say, Brodeur retired when he was 43. I think there's still a lot of life left in Marc-Andre Fleury. I salute him this week.
You don't think he could win 3 50-game seasons to take that record? Do you think that'd be the challenge?
Usually.
Last thing in the NHL before we move into the NFL, just a quick Winnipeg and Vancouver. I know we talked about your Jets last week, but Winnipeg and Vancouver tied for the most points in the NHL. Who had that happening on their bingo card? Like, where was that?
That is crazy. Who had the Edmonton Oilers winning? I don't know how many.
11 in a row now. I think at this point, as we record,
after beating the Leafs the other night. Who would have picked that too? And now it's all about, the media is all over which Canadian team has a chance of winning the cup. But yes, Winnipeg and Vancouver are doing it very quietly. They're doing it with good coaching. They're doing it with a team concept. Vancouver went on the road, Chris, 7-game road trip that went 5-1-1 through the Eastern Seaboard. You got to tip your hat for that. That's a tough sled. And the Winnipeg Jets are winning some games without Mark Scheifele. So they've got some balance. But I think it starts behind the bench for both of those teams. Rick Tocchet and Rick Bowness, the 2 Ricks, are doing the job out west.
And don't forget, Kadri's got his Flames on a 4-game winning streak as well. So it looks like everything's clicking well out in the western side of the country. All right, let's go to the NFL. Jerry, I want your final thoughts on Super Wildcard Weekend. A lot of the games were absolute trash. What a blowout. We had an absolute refrigerator bowl in Kansas City. But overall, what disappointed you the most? I mean, what shocked you the most? I think all of our picks were trash from last week. I don't think
they weren't bad.
If we got any right.
They weren't bad, Chris, but who's going to predict Green Bay is going to go into Dallas and do what they did? So here's a comparison I drew today when I was thinking about Dallas. I was thinking about Dallas, America's team. I was thinking about the Toronto Maple Leafs, Canada's team. And both of them have similarities in regards, she's dynamite during the regular season. Can't win a game in the playoffs. Can't go on anywhere in the playoffs. You have Canada's team and America's team. The Dallas Cowboys were always called America's team. Right. Well, boy, oh boy, did they ever stink it up. And I love the fact that Green Bay and their rookie quarterback come in and do it to them in a big way. Are they looking for Belichick? Who knows? Let me give you some headlines of what I saw, Chris. The Detroit and LA Rams game, best game of the weekend. Goff and Stafford going toe-to-toe. And you know what? The football gods kind of gave it back to Detroit on a possible pass interference late in the game against Detroit. Was not called. So it makes up for that call that they didn't get in Dallas just a week before that. So sometimes the football gods come back. In regards to, I'm tired of talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm glad they're gone. I'm happy for Tampa Bay. They surprised me somewhat. I'm happy for Houston. And really, no chance for Miami in Kansas City. And no, Buffalo and Pittsburgh bored me to death. There's my observations on all the games.
You and I share almost the exact same opinion. I mean, The Bills game, it did go the way I thought it would go. I mean, you get that factor in there. It was moved. What I did find interesting, and I was reading up on it, of course, because the question mark was, well, if the Bills game was moved to Monday, why wasn't the Kansas City game rescheduled? And that was in the NFLPA or whatnot. Apparently, there is a clause in there for snow, but there is no clause in there for cold weather. So that's why it wasn't
Right.
moved. Overall,
Yes.
the Joe Flacco story, I wanted to see it continue, but at the end of the day, you can't be disappointed with what happened with the Browns. Overall, I wasn't extremely disappointed. I mean, I did kind of laugh at the fact the Cowboys got eliminated. The Eagles, same idea. The question mark now is what's going to happen with Jason Kelce. Of course, the media says he's retiring. He comes out and says he's not sure yet. So we'll see. But let's talk about the games coming up this weekend, because that's what we got to look at. So right now, the matchup, you got Houston at Baltimore, Green Bay at San Fran, Tampa Bay at Detroit, and Kansas City. Taylor Swift making her way to hang out with Bills Mafia up in Buffalo. We'll see how that game goes. But overall, CJ Stroud, I don't think anybody's beating Baltimore. I don't. Plus, it looked like Mark Andrews has hit the 21-day able to practice window. He was activated last week. So the question mark is what happens there. Out of all these games, which one excites you the most? For me, I will tell you, I think it's Kansas City Buffalo, although it looks like they're calling for another 2 feet of snow in Buffalo this weekend. So we'll see how that plays out. What are you looking forward to?
I'm still in love with Detroit, and I don't know what
Love
we're
the
going to
story.
get from Tampa Bay. So that's an intriguing game for me. I still think I love the way, if I can reflect back to last weekend, the way Goff and the Lions came aggressively out from the opening kickoff and drove down the field and were passing crisply and running crisply. And they love to run the ball, which I like from any football team. It keeps the defense guessing. And I don't know if Tampa's got the defense to stay with the Lions. I'm telling you, I think the Lions can get to a championship final in the AFC, NFC rather, and I think they can do it and beat Tampa Bay this week. So you have two teams on a bye, and sometimes that's good or bad. Chris, San Francisco and Tampa Bay had byes, or Baltimore rather had byes. I think it's good for both of them. I think Houston's playing on house money. And could they fluke one in Baltimore? Well, Baltimore has been known to stumble in the playoffs, Chris, but this team is different, I think. They're a team that's very difficult to play against, and you got everybody rested. San Francisco, same thing. Green Bay's happy. They beat Dallas, and they're thrilled about all that. But Kansas City going to Buffalo. Kansas City can handle the cold. That's not it. But they don't have the home field. This is going to be interesting because this has never happened before.
First time,
Kansas
right?
City going to Buffalo. Kansas City going to Buffalo and trying to advance.
So I know if you ask producer Jay here, Gerry, he'll tell you no stresses at all. Kansas City's going to march all over the Bills. No worries at all. He's that confident in what this group can do. I have to agree with you. The Detroit story has just been wonderful. I've absolutely loved the way that whole scenario played out. You talked last week about the Stafford situation and the Jared Goff thing and how that all played out. Thought it was a great storyline. Talking about Houston, you said playing with house money. The reason I think that's great is because you are right. Look, CJ Stroud, rookie quarterback, comes in, does what he does. I didn't have him pounding the Browns the way he did last week, but coming into this, Lamar is built different. Like you talked about how Baltimore, has a tendency to not get this whole thing done. Well, I agree with you. Typically they don't. There's some concerns there, but I think between everything going on in Baltimore right now, I think that there's a good chance the Baltimore Ravens could go to the Super Bowl. And on the flip side of that, you're looking at Green Bay, San Fran. You talk about Jordan Love and what he did and how that whole thing played out. Look, any team that's got Kittle, McCaffrey, Debo, like they're stacked. The Niners are going to be, again, unless something happens that I'm completely shocked and they shock the world, I can't see any scenario where Green Bay comes out of San Fran with a win. Baker Mayfield playing, if I had to check my glass, I would have thought that was vintage Tom Brady back there. But at the same time, Baker played well. Their D-line was absolutely relentless last week. Tampa Bay came on in and did what they did. Talking about the Niners again. Yeah, excuse me. I just want to put it out there real quick that, you talked about Baltimore and San Francisco kind of having their breaks. Well, them having their breaks and making sure everybody's healthy, I think is going to be a force to reckon with. But hey, maybe they had too much time off. So I'm not sure how this whole thing plays out. So right now, yeah, overall, I'm excited for the weekend. We're going to talk next week about exactly what we think the AFC matchups. We're going to give some predictions. And then, of course, we're going to be excited to do this whole thing about the Super Bowl. So I guess stay tuned for all of it. Yeah, I love talking NFL for sure. Well, it's about that time of the week, Gerry. It's time for the Atlantic scene with Gerry Green. Gerry, what is happening here in Atlantic Canada? I want the local sports news. What's going on?
Well, the local sports news, Chris, is always, for me, focusing on hockey. And of course, the MHL is the top of my viewing schedule. I see a lot of games during the regular season, but I've never seen anything like this during the trade period and the finalizing of rosters. How many teams, the contenders that is, which there's 4 of them, went after high-priced talent. I don't mean high-priced talent, high-quality talent in regards to Q players. And so those 4 contenders, Summerside, West Kent, Edmundston, and Miramichi, have done that, and their rosters are now finalized. But it's interesting, you look at the Southern Division, Summerside leads it by a long shot, and then you have 4 teams, three points apart for 3 playoff spots. It's going to be very fascinating down the stretch in the MHL's South Division. Meanwhile, in the North, it's battling out between West Kent and Edmundston, but Miramichi is lurking as they're trying to come up from third. I saw Miramichi win 4-3 last Saturday night, Chris, versus West Kent. Both lined up sprinkled with some quality Q players. It was up-tempo. It was high-skilled. It was amazing. It was a great game. 2 good teams going toe-to-toe. If you do get a chance to see the MHL in action, it is going to be interesting going down the stretch. AUS, well, it continues, and UMB continues for the men, seem to be still on top and are still undefeated at 20-0. Moncton still sits in second place in the AUS at 13-7-2. They won their last 3. Meanwhile, Moncton plays in UMB Friday night at 7 o'clock. That's my game of the week. AUS women's, UMB still sits on top at 16-4, followed by St. FX at 15-3-2. Both of them have 32 points. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to take the crown this year for the women. There's about a month left in the schedule for the men and the women in the AUS. Meanwhile, St. Thomas is 4th. Moncton is 6th. Guess what? St. Thomas and Moncton play this Friday night, and they do so in Moncton at 7 o'clock. And the other under-18 NBPEI Hockey League, Chris, the Moncton Flyers are still on top at 16-4-2 for 34 points, followed by the Charlottetown Knights with 31 points. Those 2 teams, guess what, meet Saturday at the Superior Propane Center in Moncton at 7:30. That's your update, Chris. How about giving me your 2 cents?
Thanks. And, this one was going to be a little tough for me to come up with, Gerry, because I was trying to think of something what I want to talk about. And then, boom, breaking news hit about an hour and a half, 2 hours before we started recording. And that, of course, is the news of Pascal Siakam, former Toronto Raptors superstar, finally dealt, going to the Indiana Pacers. Now, the reason that I want to give my opinion about this is it's an interesting scenario. First, I'll tell you the trade. So the Raptors sending Siakam to the Pacers for forward Bruce Bound, Jordan Nwora, 2 first-round picks in 2024, and a first-round pick in 2026. On top of that, the Raptors are also going to receive point guard Kira Lewis from the New Orleans as part of that deal. So overall, if you look at it, the Raptors are getting 3 players and 3 first-round picks for Pascal Siakam. Now, Siakam, of course, a couple of years ago, I would tell you, this guy's your future. This guy's your star. He was the one. But as lately, he's proven he's more of a number 2. I don't think he's got the ability to carry a team like the Raptors had initially hoped. This year, his average points per game are 22.2, rebounds are 6.3, assists 4.9. So overall, I'm looking at this deal and go, okay, on paper, it looks like the Raptors got a massive haul for Pascal Siakam. You're thinking 3 players, 3 first-rounders. But if you dive a little deeper, these first-rounders are going to be late first-rounders. We're talking anywhere from the 20 to the 30 range. And if that happens, then you break it down and go, okay, all reports are indicating that this upcoming draft year, which is where these picks are coming from, is probably going to be one of the worst drafts that the NBA's seen in a long time. So now the Raptors have gone from having, picks that they had moved out because they didn't want to draft, to now bringing first-round picks, and now they've got 2 of them into this draft. Overall, I don't like the deal. I was swayed, thanks to our producer, before we started recording this, because at first I was the guy on paper going, the Raptors walked away like bandits. But now breaking this whole thing down, Brown's a throw-in. These first-round picks are late. Maybe this is the best offer they've gotten for Pascal Siakam. They had to make a move. And if this is the best one they had, what's that tell you about him? Anyways, either way, big trade in the NBA. That's my 2 cents. Gerry, I can't wait to hear yours. Tell me what your 2 cents are, and let's close this thing off.
Well, of course, we started the program talking about attendance in the queue. My focus this year, my 2 cents focus is about the attendance in the NHL. Remember last week, I berated the Phoenix Coyotes for the lack of people they have in the rink. Now I'm going to talk about teams that have put people in the rinks. The line comes from Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. He will come. Well, I'm talking about 2 teams that we used to joke about, Chris, that you watch them on TV and their stands were empty, and you wondered how they could survive and how they are surviving there and why do they stay there. I'm talking about the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers. Both of them have turned their attendance around big time. Both of them average over 18,000 fans now, Chris. And why is that? Because they're winning and because they've got stable management, they've got stable coaching, and they brought in quality players. Just think about the turnaround Florida has had since they brought in Tkachuk. And Tkachuk's really changed things down there. And everybody plays with that same intensity that he does. They are now getting 18,000 fans in Miami to come watch the Florida Panthers. Meanwhile, in Carolina, they've had Rod Brind'Amour, who's been a Carolina Hurricane, it seems like forever. And ever since they got Peters out and Brind'Amour in, the quality of the play improved and the attendance grew and grew. I've been to Carolina, Chris, and there's not a whole lot of, you would think, hockey fans there. And it's a rink that's out in the middle of nowhere, but they come and watch. Now, Chris, you might like this. The number 1 team when it comes to attendance in the NHL, 21,091 fans on average, the Montreal Canadiens. So we tip our hats to the Canadians. And again, Canadians love hockey, be it whatever coast you're on or whatever province you're in. Canadians will come and watch hockey if you're putting up an honest effort. And it's always a big night out in Montreal to go and watch the Canadiens. That's my 2 cents about attendance in the NHL. For Chris, I'm Gerry. We thank you for watching. That's our 2 cents.